Michelle Krebs, executive analyst at Auto Trader, and Tyson Jominy, vice president of data and analytics at J.D. Power. It's great to see you both. Michelle, I'll begin with you. When we talk about this extra day, it was apparently huge, right, for the industry, for autos and the buying that goes along with it.
Well, I don't know if it's just the one day, but we certainly are seeing a very resilient consumer, one that's willing to go out and shop. You know, we saw big Cyber Monday sales, and they're also buying cars. So the monthly sales data is a little funky these days because not everybody reports on a monthly basis. But we saw some big upside surprises.
Yeah, so Tyson, when we look at what's going on here with the numbers, what do you make of it? Are you seeing a very enthusiastic consumer? What are they buying overall in particular?
Well, consumers continue to buy SUVs like they've been doing. That's a fairly old story, Nicole. But what they're really doing is they're seeing the incentives that are in the marketplace. J.D. Power, we estimate those incentives per unit will exceed $4,500 in November. And so consumers are really coming out for some pretty significant discounts, and that made November appear to be a very strong month.
Yeah, and in fact, actually, Tyson, when we were looking at those incentives, I mean, I was looking at some sort of records and fleet activity, but the incentives were really jumping out in all the stories that I was reading. And why are the incentives so high?
Well, quite frankly, we have way too many old model years on the lot. That would be model year 19 vehicles. We're trying to get rid of those. At this point in the year, you go back to 2014, we were selling 55% of vehicles were the new model year. Whereas this year, this November, it's going to be closer to 40. So we're about 15 percentage points behind where we need to be in that transition. And what that means for consumers is there's a lot of big deals on those 19s sitting around, because that's what we need to clear out right now. So that's really where we're seeing a lot of the incentive action is on those outgoing models, because there's so many of them.
Also, I wanted to ask you, Michelle, about all things GM and the strike that went along with it. And there's actually a battle going on between General Motors and Fiat Chrysler about bribing union officials. GM is saying that the Fiat Chrysler folks are doing that. They're denying that. The strike, the union, your thoughts?
Well, first of all, that took out a lot of production. So GM inventory was down, and we'll see when the numbers all settle in if they were able to rebuild it. So that's a big key in the story here. And then, of course, the Fiat Chrysler just settled its contract with the union, thankfully without another strike. And there's been a vicious battle, especially on the truck front, between GM, the Chevrolet Silverado, and the Ram 1500. The Ram has been outselling the Chevy Silverado. So there's just a wicked battle out there and the dealerships between those two in particular.
Yeah, absolutely. Another thing that has been front and center is EV, right? Electric vehicles, Tyson, and the LA Auto Show. And I saw you mentioned some names here: Ford Mustang Mach-E, the Tesla Cybertruck, Audi, Hyundai. What's going on with electric vehicles, Tyson? How much in demand will they really be?
Well, as an industry, we're talking about electric vehicles a lot, and anyone who saw news from the LA Auto Show, as you mentioned, Nicole, had a lot of unveilings for EVs. But the truth of the matter is they still remain below 2% of sales in the U.S. Now, it's an important distinction because in the rest of the world, they are a bit higher. But in the U.S., in fact, just in Q3, J.D. Power released a study that they just surpassed manual transmissions for the first time ever in Q3, and those have been on a century-long decline. So despite EVs being in the market and all the press and all the launches, there's just not a lot of sales of EVs still, even after about 10 years in the marketplace.
And Michelle, what are your thoughts on EVs, or just what's hot and what's not? What do you think sells going into 2020? We talked about SUVs being hot.
Well, as Tyson says, there's a lot more publicity around EVs than there are sales, that's for sure. And I think that will continue. We are going to see a boatload of EVs introduced over the next couple of years. And the market is just not there yet. So that's going to be an amazing battle to watch. And, we've got to build an infrastructure. We did a study that showed there's a lot of groundwork to be done, educating dealers and in terms of how to sell them to consumers, building the infrastructure up, because that's one of the big deficits. So this is going to take time. But in the meantime, everybody's putting EVs out there and nobody's making money on them.
Good point. All right, great to see you both. Thanks to our panel, Michelle Krebs, executive analyst at Auto Trader, and Tyson Jominy, vice president of data and analytics at J.D. Power.